ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the podcast. And today I'm going to go my review of AEW's Dynamite. Starting off the evening, we'll go to our first match of the night. It is for the AEW International Championship. It is Jon Moxley versus Big Bill. I thought it was a good match. Back and forth matchup between Moxley and Big Bill, with Big Bill keeping the pace of the match. Big Bill then hits Boss Man Slam on Moxley in the middle of the ring for a near fall. Moxley and Big Bill then both exchange in the middle of the ring, with Moxley hitting a devastating cutter on Bill. Ricky Starks then attacks Moxley ringside. Danielson comes down to the ring to attack Ricky Starks. Big Bill then hits a choke slam on Moxley for a near fall, but Moxley ultimately applies a triangle choke on Big Bill. Bill taps out, and your winner of the match, and still international champion, is Jon Moxley. After the match, Ricky and Big Bill then attack Bryan Danielson and Jon Moxley. Claudio Castagnoli comes down to the ring to save Danielson and Moxley. Moving on from that, we have a Don Callis segment. Don Callis is in the ring with Takeshita and Tony Schiavone. Don Callis is going to reveal his next masterpiece. Callis then mentions beating Omega twice with the helps from Takeshita. Don says that Takeshita is better than all the greats. He even mentions Antonio Inoki. Takeshita now is known as the Alpha, according to Don Callis. Don Callis then reveals his next target, which is Kota Ibushi. And then Don Callis ends up mocking Kenny Omega again. A couple things I want to say about this, man. Number one, I'm loving what Don Callis is doing right now with Takeshita. I think it's absolutely awesome. I think Don Callis is one of the biggest heels right now in AEW. And I have a lot of high praise for Takeshita, man. I think Takeshita is one of those guys. And again, I'm not trying to put the cart before the horse here, man, when I say this. But I think, with Takeshita, I think you can put him up there with the Omegas and the Ospreys and, even old school legends, man, like the Great Muta. You can put Takeshita in that conversation. I'm not saying right now. But for the next 5 years, I can totally see Takeshita as being a top dog for AEW. 100%, man, especially with the mouthpiece from Don Callis, the way that, Takeshita wrestles. Obviously, he made a big name for himself over in DDT. Had some great matches with Omega, even over a DDT as well. Takeshita is just, he's an awesome athlete, man. I think he's a great wrestler. Having the mouthpiece of Don Callis and Takeshita being a heel, it's absolutely perfect, man. And for what it's worth, I don't know exactly when this match will take place between Takeshita and Ibushi. If I had to guess, the match between Takeshita and Ibushi will take place at Wrestle Dream, which takes place October 1st in Seattle, Washington, which I'm all for that, man. I think that match is going to be severely underrated. It's going to be a high-profile match, and I cannot wait to see Takeshita versus Ibushi possibly at Wrestle Dream October 1st. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is a fatal four-way match, and the winner will be the number one contender for the AEW Women's Championship. It is Toni Storm versus Hikaru Shida versus Nyla Rose and Britt Baker. I thought it was a decent match, back-and-forth matchup, but Shida was keeping the pace of the match, but Toni Storm ultimately hits a roll-up, pins for the 3, and your winner of the match and moving on to face Saraya for the AEW Women's Championship is Toni Storm. Hats off to Toni Storm for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we have a Jericho and Sammy Guevara segment. We're going to get Jericho versus Guevara at Grand Slam. Jericho then plays a video package of Jericho and Guevara from their past when they met, when Guevara came into AEW, when Jericho came into AEW. Jericho then hypes up Guevara. He also mentions putting in a call to NWA because I think Jericho said that he had seen him at an NWA show, and Jericho was really, had a lot of praise for Guevara. Jericho then reached out to Tony Khan for Tony Khan to bring in Sammy Guevara, and obviously the rest is history. Jericho then continues to praise Guevara. Guevara then hypes up Jericho. Guevara also mentions that there will be no AEW without Jericho. Guevara then says he came to AEW to be world champion and not to be in Jericho's shadow. Jericho then also tells Guevara that he's not ready to beat him yet. Jericho and then Guevara get face-to-face, hype up the match that they're going to have. So, again, man, I'm all for this matchup. And this kind of goes hand-in-hand with what I just said about Takeshita, man. Sammy Guevara, there's some people out there that hate Sammy Guevara. There's people out there that love Sammy Guevara. I'm a big fan of Guevara, man. I think Guevara is going to be one of those guys that's going to be, obviously he's one of the pillars for AEW. But the talent, man. Guevara has talent. And do I agree that, do I think it's time for Guevara to do his own thing and kind of get away from Jericho? Yeah, I think it is. Because at this point, Jericho, I mean, you got to give credit where credit's due, man. Jericho constantly reinvents himself, man. I think that's why he's so relevant even now. And I think that's one thing that you got to give credit to Jericho, man. Jericho always adapts and overcomes. That's why Jericho is one of the top dogs right now in professional wrestling. But I also think it's time for Guevara to do his own thing. To go after the TNT Championship again, or the International Championship, or even the World Championship. Guevara's a household name, man, and every single week, I mean, even Jericho said the same thing, man. He's constantly getting better and better and better every single week. And, this matchup between Jericho and Guevara next week, man, at Grand Slam is going to be absolutely awesome, man. I'm telling you right now, that could be match of the night. To be honest with you, I think it's a sleeper match. I think Jericho and Guevara are going to tear the house down at Grand Slam and Arthur Ashe next week, so I'm definitely looking forward to that. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Adam Page versus Brian Cage. This is match number 3 between both Page and Cage. The match itself was a good matchup. Back and forth matchup between Adam Page and Brian Cage, with Page keeping the pace of the match. Page then hits a 619 out of Rey Mysterio's book on Cage. Swerve is here. Swerve is standing on the stage, just looking on in the match. Page and Cage then both exchange in the middle of the ring, with Cage hitting a power slam on Adam Page. Adam Page then gets up, hits a moonsault to the outside, taking out Brian Cage. Page then hits a Deadeye on Brian Cage, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match is Adam Page. After the match, Page grabs a microphone. Page then mocks Swerve. Swerve then mocks Page as well. Swerve says that it's going to be himself versus Page at Wrestle Dream. Cage then attacks Adam Page, and the Young Bucks are here to save Adam Page. A couple things I want to say about this, man. Number one, it was a solid matchup between Adam Page and Brian Cage. But this is the same thing I said last week about Adam Page, and I'm even going to say the same thing about the Bucks here, which I'll get to in a minute. I'm a huge fan of the Elite. If you're an AEW fan, you're not going to not be a little bit of a fan of the Elite for what those guys have done, creating AEW, so on and so forth. But with that being said, has Adam Page done a lot in AEW as of late? No. I personally don't think he has, man. I mean, Swerve, when he cut that promo on Adam Page, I think it was a week ago, there was a little bit of, realism in that promo that he cut on Page. Not just for Swerve saying he wants to take Adam Page's spot, but the fact that Page really hasn't been relevant for the past few months. A lot of the matches that Page has been teaming up with the Elite and Kenny Omega. And some of those matches, as far as his single run's concerned, it's been not so good. And I'm not taking anything away from Adam Page, but again, Swerve made a solid point. Swerve's had some really good matches, and there's still some storylines with, Swerve that he's still yet to complete. One of the biggest ones that come to mind for me is Swerve and Keith Lee. I still think that story is not even completely done yet, but who knows if we're ever going to get Keith Lee versus Swerve again. But, it's the same thing with the Young Bucks, man. Look, they had a great match in All In, All Out, but at the same time, too, a lot of what the Young Bucks have been doing has been tied to Kenny Omega and Adam Page. I want to see the Young Bucks in the tag team division, going after the belts. Now, credit, they just had a match at All In for the AEW Tag Team Championships, but they need to start doing their own thing. And this is, this mainly pertains to Adam Page. I mean, Adam Page needs to get more predominant storylines, and he's a household name for AEW. I mean, he's one of the guys that helped started AEW. He needs to be in more predominant storylines. Kenny Omega is right now. Kenny Omega has his hands tied, with Don Callis and Takeshita. Obviously Ibushi's involved now because Takeshita and Don Callis had called out Ibushi, which I'm more likely going to see that match probably at Wrestle Dream October 1st in Seattle. But it just, they need to start building up more storylines, which I will touch base on that too in my thoughts leading up to next week at Arthur Ashe Stadium. And I'll give you guys more details on that. But all in all, it was a solid match, man. But they got to start building Adam Page a little bit more than what they have as of late. Moving on from that, we have Darby Allin teaming up with Nick Wayne versus Angelo Parker and Matt Menard. I thought it was a decent matchup. Back and forth matchup between both teams with Christian Cage and Luchasaurus. They ended up showing up in the match. Angelo Parker and Menard were keeping the pace of the match, but Darby hits a coffin drop ultimately to pins for the 3 and wins the match for him and his team. After the match, Christian then mocks Nick Wayne, talks about Nick Wayne's mom. Christian then talks about Darby and Sting at All In. And then Christian says that he wants a match between Christian and Luchasaurus versus Darby and Sting next week at Arthur Ashe Stadium, which I'm absolutely all for. That matchup next week at Arthur Ashe Stadium. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is the main event of AEW's Dynamite. It is Samoa Joe versus Roderick Strong in the Title Eliminator Tournament final matchup. I thought it was a good match. Back and forth matchup between Joe and Strong, with Joe keeping the pace of the match. Joe and Strong then both exchange in the middle of the ring, with Joe hitting a power slam on Strong in the middle of the ring. Strong then hits a power angle slam on Joe for a near fall, but Joe quickly applies a submission hold on Strong. Strong taps out, and your winner of the match is Samoa Joe. After the match, Joe grabs a microphone and talks about Grand Slam and MJF. Couple things I want to say, man, before I get out of here. Was it a solid Dynamite last night? Yes, it was. I think a lot of storylines were, being put into motion. They're still building off storylines from last week, and that's kind of what I wanted to touch base on, man. Is that you had All In and then All Out, and All In had a little bit of build, not crazy build. A lot of the build leading up to All In my opinion, was all about MJF and Adam Cole. There was the biggest storyline going into All In, and the biggest thing, in my opinion, going on in AEW. It was kind of the same thing with All Out. I mean, in the aspect that, yeah, you had MJF and Adam Cole in the card, but it wasn't, MJF defending the World Heavyweight Championship. Instead, he was defending the Ring of Honor Tag Team Championships with Adam Cole. So there really wasn't a whole lot of storyline with All In and All Out. But then we get to Arthur Ashe Stadium, and I feel like there's been a hell of a lot more build towards this Dynamite next week than it has been for All In and All Out, which is absolutely insane to me, because they really are hyping up this show at Arthur Ashe Stadium next week for Grand Slam. With that being said, do I think Grand Slam is going to be a good show? Yeah, I think it's going to be a really, really good Dynamite show. Obviously, they still had to build towards Wrestle Dream, which is taking place early next month. But honestly, the couple highlights from last night's show to me, not saying it was a bad show, number one was Don Callis. Don Callis calling out Kota Ibushi. I think it's a high-profile matchup between Takeshita and Ibushi. Hopefully we get that probably most likely at Wrestle Dream. Fantastic matchup. Chris Jericho and Sammy Guevara's segment I thought was absolutely awesome as well. Definitely looking forward to that match next week at Grand Slam between Jericho and Guevara. Jon Moxley, again, doing his thing, defending the International Championship and beating Big Bill in a crazy matchup. And then Adam Page versus Brian Cage. Solid matchup. And then we get the main event between Samoa Joe and Roderick Strong. For what it's worth, like I said, man, at the end of the day, it wasn't a bad show. I think Tony Khan did a decent showing last night. I know there's a lot of rumors coming out about Tony Khan, too, right now when it pertains to the ticket sales that were an all-in. And, I haven't really looked into the details about that, but from what I heard is that, Tony Khan and AEW did not sell entirely 82,000 seats. And supposedly, according to some of the people that I talked to, is that they only sold 72,000 and some change as far as seats are concerned over at Wembley, where Tony Khan was 100% certain that they sold 82,000 seats. So, I mean, again, I'm not trying to call Tony Khan a liar. It's still up in the air. It's still up for debate. But if that's the case, and it was only 72,000 people in attendance for All In, then where's these 10,000, where's the rest of these 10,000 tickets go? Obviously people are going to say that Tony Khan bought the 10,000 tickets for himself, and he did it only to have, the most, one of the highest paid gates in wrestling, the most fans in attendance for a wrestling show, kind of, sticking it to WWE. Who knows? Maybe Triple H and Vince McMahon called Wembley and was like, hey, man, we want to know the numbers of, how many tickets they sold, and maybe that's how it all came to fruition. I don't know, man. I mean, if that's the case and that's true, I would feel really bad for Tony Khan. I think it's a bad look on Tony Khan's part if he's really saying, okay, we sold 82,000 seats, but in reality, we only sold 72,000 seats. I mean, all in all, was All In a great show? Yeah, All In was fantastic, man. I mean, I mentioned a couple times in the past, too, leading up to All In, that, All In was going to be either, AEW's biggest success or its biggest failure. And out of the gate, I think it was a success. It just, after the fact of what happened, it did kind of turn into a failure in the aspect of the situation between CM Punk and Jack Perry. We don't know what's going to happen with Jack Perry. For what I know, he's suspended indefinitely, so we don't know when or if he will come back to AEW. Hopefully he does. But in the same breath of that, CM Punk was also fired and let go from the company, which I made comments about that too, about CM Punk. I think personally he was trying to do everything he could to get fired from AEW. And the news that I found out about CM Punk before he got, when he got fired was insane. I mean, this guy was pretty much already setting up his return with WWE way before even the stuff happened between the Young Bucks at the All Out media scrum. Like, he already had plans in his head on how he was going to return to WWE. The Royal Rumble, he was going to get eliminated in the Rumble, and his opponent, the person that eliminated him, would be a match between that person and Punk at WrestleMania. So he already had things in motion for a possible return to WWE in a match at WrestleMania, well before the whole Young Bucks incident and, the incident with Jack Perry and Adam Page. He wanted to return to WWE. There's also a lot of speculation as of today that Jade Cargill, she just made her return to Collision, or her return to AEW on Collision, and, obviously she attacked Chris Statlander, the current TBS champion. But there's been a lot of speculation and rumors going on around Jade that, she's not going to be with AEW for the long haul, and she has all her sights set on going over to WWE. And to be honest with you, man, I know there's some people that are saying that this, if Jade goes over to WWE, Tony Khan dropped the ball. To be honest with you, man, I am like literally 60-40 on that, to be honest with you. Do I think Jade's a great athlete? Yeah. I think she's a great athlete. And at the time, man, she was, the female Goldberg. She had that undefeated streak. She had really high-profile matches. I still think at times that, she needed to get a little bit more wrestling underneath her belt, in my honest opinion. But is she a good wrestler? Yeah, I think, prime example is this. If let's say that Jade does go to, to WWE. The best fit for Jade, if she does go to WWE, would be putting her in NXT. I think Jade would be great in NXT. Under the, the teachers over at NXT, like, Shawn Michaels, number one. Shawn Michaels would take Jade underneath his belt and teach her the ways of NXT as far as, cutting promos and, in-ring action and stuff like that. And what better teacher to have, than Shawn Michaels. So, I mean, like I said, with Jade, with Shawn Michaels kind of shadowing over Jade Cargill if she goes to NXT and, her kind of learning, about the business under a guy like Shawn Michaels, or, whoever's involved there in NXT, I think it would be great for her career. It's only going to elevate her career even more than what it is now. And, I mean, does she have a name? Absolutely. And you can thank Tony Khan for that. But, she can take what she's learned in AEW and then take that over to NXT and be a household name. And at the end of the day, what is left for Jade Cargill to do in AEW? I mean, she's gone through almost everybody on that roster right now in AEW. There's really nothing left for her to do. Obviously, she has a match with Statlander this Friday on Rampage for the TBS Championship. But other than that, man, there's really nothing left for Jade Cargill to do in AEW. Do I think she reached her ceiling in AEW? Yes, I do. I truly believe that she has. I mean, there might be some other matches on the table. I mean, maybe Mercedes Moné versus Jade Cargill. That's, always an option. But I don't know, man. I think, if she does decide to go to WWE and maybe they put her in NXT, like I said, being under the teachings of Shawn Michaels and being underneath, the belt of Shawn Michaels and learning the ways from NXT, and what better teacher to have but Shawn Michaels, I think it would be sky's the limit for Jade if she does go to NXT. To be honest with you, the ceiling for Jade would be a lot more higher in NXT and WWE than it would be AEW. So I don't think Tony Khan will drop the ball on that. I know some people may disagree, and that's their opinion. But I think the sky's the limit for Jade if she does decide to go over to WWE, to be honest. I mean, there's a lot of good wrestlers over there. She can have a match with Bianca Belair, Charlotte Flair, Becky Lynch, Tiffany Stratton. The list goes on. Becky Lynch, Bayley, Io Shirai. I mean, there's Asuka. There's a lot of good matches on the table for her in WWE as well. So, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and, downplay the fact that, oh, yeah, Jade can't wrestle or anything. No, it's not about that, man. It's the fact that she's done her job in AEW. And if she thinks that it might, the grass might be greener over in WWE, then by all means. But for what I understand, obviously, I don't cover WWE. I cover AEW and Collision. But at the same time, too, I know that, WWE just had that merger a day or two ago with UFC to create TKO. So Could there be budget cuts coming? Probably. I would not be surprised if, some talent do get released from their contracts. I think, for WWE's sake, I think the next few months and leading into the winter months are going to be absolutely insane for WWE. I think it's going to be insane. Crazy. But, yeah, I mean, all in all, Dynamite was a solid show, man. I don't think it was a bad show. I think it's crazy how Arthur Ashe next week has more build than both All In and All Out combined. I mean, they are building this show up to be the best thing since sliced bread, to be honest with you. So, take that with what you will. But at the end of the day, it wasn't a bad show. Was I surprised with the outcome of Samoa Joe versus Roderick Strong? Not entirely. I think the more profile matchup was Samoa Joe versus MJF for the AEW World Heavyweight Championship, and to be honest, I think that's going to be one hell of a match, man. It's going to be a banger of a match between Joe and MJF, especially the history that those guys have. Even when MJF was pretty much an extra on NXT, and Joe was the world champion in NXT at the time. Everybody knows, seen the video clip when Joe had pushed MJF the first time. Then a week ago we get, Joe pushing MJF and MJF trying to attack Joe and vice versa. So, I mean, obviously the money match is between MJF and Samoa Joe. And it's crazy, man. Even Wrestle Dream is starting to stack up. You got Swerve and Adam Page. You got the Dream match that was supposed to happen at the first Forbidden Door pay-per-view, which is Bryan Danielson against Zack Sabre Jr., who's Jr. is the current New Japan Pro Wrestling's television champion. You got Bryan Danielson, who's an absolute legend. I mean, some people might love this match. Some people might hate it. I think it's going to be a very technical matchup, a very, a lot of submission wrestling, if I had to assume, between Danielson and Zack Sabre Jr. And I think, for me personally, I think it's going to be a great match. I think it's going to be absolutely awesome. And I'm looking forward to who else they're going to book for AEW's Wrestle Dream coming up October 1st in Seattle, Washington. But that's it for me, man. This is my review of AEW's Dynamite. I hope you guys are out there staying safe. Be careful. And remember, stay classic. Peace.